Thank you very much. Let me thank in a special way all those that were involved in the restoration of the Madonna and Child with St. Mary Magdalene that came to Chicago and to our Art Institute as part of the celebration of my 50th anniversary as a priest. I'm very touched by that gesture, and I think everybody was very impressed by the beauty of the painting that was restored with your help. So I want to say in a particular way I thank the patrons for their kindness and the way in which they associated their own work, your work, with the moment in my own life that was very significant for me. I thank you. Jack just talked about these beautiful artworks as the patrimony of the human race. And that is very clear when you take a look at 5 of the restoration projects that the Illinois chapter has sponsored. The ones that come from the Missionary Ethnological Department, the 5 of them, were in some moment, probably around 1933, brought to the Vatican by missionaries, some of them by my own religious missionary institute, because in 1933, Pope Pius XI, who was a very mission-minded pope, wanted to celebrate the 1900th anniversary of our redemption from AD 33 to AD 1933. And in order to do that, he wanted to collect works from all the countries to the ends of the earth where the gospel had been preached. And so many mission groups were involved in creating what is now the Missionary Ethnological Department of the Vatican Museums. And I'm not sure as I go through which came from which institute, but I'm sure that most of those that would come from the northern part of the hemisphere would probably have been brought by missionaries from my own religious order. So it's not just that the works represent the patrimony of the human race, but so many human beings have been involved. Those who made these artworks, whether they were Christian or not, those who assemble them in these marvelous museums, the Vatican museums, those who care for them with your help to restore them and to make them available so people who look at them can be brought into the great depth and the breadth of human experience and can help us to understand who we are as human beings and not just as citizens of a particular state or anything else that is limiting. The scope is as wide as the scope of creation itself. The Vatican Museums are under the governance structure of the Vatican City State, the civil arm of the Holy See. And as you know from the papers, there's been a very thorough reform of the structures in Vatican finances. The Vatican is a very old institution, not as the Vatican City State that just comes from 1929, but as the seat of the successor of Peter, it goes back 2,000 years. And so things grow up, whether you're talking about the court system or you're talking about the financial system. And over the centuries, very many structures to take care of finances from this part and finances from that part grew up and operated in silos. And that's not a very good way to run a unified operation, particularly in these days when accountability is so important. There was no way you could get a unified financial statement to indicate what was the state of Vatican finances. And in 1 year, Pope Francis has been able to put the new structures in place. And I was very impressed. I knew the situation somewhat because I was part of an oversight group of 15 cardinals from around the world who have been making recommendations for years as we got reports and couldn't make sense of all of it. And suddenly, in the space of a year, Pope Francis has had the courage to reform the structures. Now we'll see if they work. But I say that because it should be a comfort to you and reassuring that money donated by this group is going for the purposes and will go for the purposes for which you donated, and it will be transparent. They'll know exactly in the reports what went where, and that's, of course, part of the reform of the financial instruments that are now more and more international in scope themselves. So the money that is raised through the patrons here is now much more clearly accounted for in the financial statements of the Holy See. That's important, so people know that their desires as donors are being respected. So I want to thank all of you again, especially Anne and the members of the board and those who have made this get-together tonight possible. It's a great joy to be able to use this courtyard, which itself is inspired by 13th century France, but built here by Cardinal Archbishop Mundelein at that time, and preserving, therefore, a sense of the way the faith influenced architecture in Western Europe and still find a home in a very new part of the world that wasn't even thought of when the models for these buildings were first created. That is the way in which we understand that the faith is handed on from generation to generation and is expressed in new ways and in old ways all around the world. I think that's probably what most stayed with me, the lessons, the personal lessons that helped form my own sense of who I am as a Catholic and as a priest and a bishop. For the time that I was the Vicar General of my missionary order, I visited a lot of countries, very poor countries for the most part, and even in wealthy countries with poor people. And I lived always, never in hotels, but with the people who were working with those people. So I got to hear a lot of stories about the faith and about the church and about how it influences people's lives. Great art is one such influence. But what I came away from was two deeply rooted convictions. One is that the faith truly is Catholic, even though it takes forms that we wouldn't recognize at first until you ask what's behind that and what's the reason for this. But it is truly Catholic, but it takes many different forms, including many different artistic forms. And then secondly, that everywhere in the world, except sometimes in our own country, unfortunately, the church is a sign of hope and of freedom for people. Wherever I was, especially in very poor countries, no matter what else was going wrong, people were sure that in their parishes or with their priests and with the sisters, they would find security and hope and an oasis of peace in situations that were conflict-ridden. So you're part of that in contributing to this. You're part of it through your prayers, through the celebration of the Eucharist particularly. But know that that is what is the reason for the museums, to create through art these oases of peace and of hope for people in personal difficulties or in social difficulties, whatever. It's important that we be able to find those places and live in them as people of faith. So I thank you for being part of that work, and I thank you for being here tonight. God bless you.